He told me he cheated while I was pregnant. Then had the nerve to demand I get tested for an STD he contracted. For 16 years. I thought he was the faithful type. The reason I married him and had his baby. Now, with a newborn and my entire life tied to him, I just realized the man I loved never even existed. It was his birthday, 3.5 months after our baby was born. The kid was finally sleeping through the night. Mostly. And I was starting to feel not quite human again. But at least not like a walking zombie. We'd been married for a little over a year now. And while intimacy had been off the table for a long time, first because of the pregnancy, then recovery, then just sheer exhaustion, I thought tonight might be different. It'd been healed for a while. Medically speaking. Things had been weird between us. With him always shooting me down whenever I tried to initiate anything. I told myself it was just the stress of a newborn. Or maybe he wasn't attracted to me anymore post-baby. And I didn't push it. But it was his birthday. A new beginning. Maybe. A chance to reconnect. Had just put the baby down in a crib. And I was sitting on the couch, trying to conjure up some kind of birthday, sexy mood. I think I even had a half smile on my face. Ready to make a move. Say something sweet. But before I could even open my mouth, he walked over, sat down next to me, and just started talking. He looked uncomfortable. Like he was about to tell me he had totaled the car or something. My stomach did a weird flip. Then the words came out. Slow and deliberate. But like a punch to the gut, I have something to tell you. I cheated on you at the end of last year. My brain just stalled. Last year the world tilted. I immediately stopped him. The half smile gone. Replaced by a cold dread I couldn't explain. While I was pregnant, the question wasn't even a question. It was a statement of horror. He just nodded. Eyes on the floor. Yes. The silence that followed was deafening. Except for the frantic buzzing in my ears. While I was pregnant. With our baby. A baby he supposedly wanted. A baby we'd both talked about for years. This wasn't some random fling from our early dating days. This was during our first year of marriage. During the time I was carrying our child. My mind raced. Trying to piece together the timeline. Late last year that meant I was heavily pregnant. Probably enormous. Definitely not feeling my best. And he was out doing this. All those times had seemed uncomfortable with intimacy. All those little red flags I dismissed. Chalking them up to him being the faithful type. I realized then that his discomfort wasn't about my changing body. Or his respect for our pregnancy. It was about her. My thoughts were a chaotic mess of betrayal and confusion. But then he kept going. And the reason for his sudden honesty hit me with another sickening blow. He said, "She found out she has herpes." That sentence ripped me out of the emotional freefall and slammed me into a completely different kind of crisis. My husband, the man I married, the father of my child, just told me he had an STD, had gone and gotten tested. And sure enough, he has it too. And now he wants me to get tested. To see if he's had it all this time. Or if she gave it to him. My brain, which had been reeling from the cheating, suddenly shifted gears. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about my health. Our baby's health. This wasn't just a broken heart. It was a potential biological threat. I sat there, trying to process these words. Trying to make sense of the fact that the faithful man I knew for 16 years was now sitting in front of me. A stranger. A liar. And potentially, a carrier of a disease he wanted me to confirm. How do you even begin to untangle something like this? The cheating alone is devastating. But the fact that it came out because of an STD. And now I have to get tested for herpes. I'm paralyzed. Reddit. I don't even know where to begin. How do I even think about this without losing my mind? What do I do right now? After he dropped the herpes bomb. My mind, for a brief, terrifying second, turned strictly clinical. Like a switch flipped from heartbroken wife to concerned patient. I needed answers. Medical answers. Before my brain could even begin to process the rest. You didn't use a condom, I asked. My voice thin. Barely my own. His response was infuriatingly casual. I did. But not for oral. Not for oral. My eyes narrowed. It was such a flimsy, pathetic excuse. Like that somehow makes it better. Like it makes the disease less transmissible. The sheer idiocy of it was enraging. He was trying to minimize it. To rationalize his gross negligence. And 2 times he claimed it was only 2 times. Like that's some kind of magic number where betrayal doesn't count. My brain kept replaying the scene in my head, imagining him with her. The casualness. The disregard for my health. For our life. Suddenly, all those weird moments from late last year, during my pregnancy, clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Remember how I said he was increasingly uncomfortable with intimacy as my belly got bigger, how I thought it was just him being respectful? Or maybe me imagining things, yeah. No. That wasn't about me or the baby. That was him. Already tainted. His emotional distance wasn't due to the impending arrival of our child. It was a consequence of his affair. He was probably already feeling guilty. Or maybe just disgusted with himself. And projecting that onto me. The thought made my skin crawl. He wasn't uncomfortable because of my body. He was uncomfortable because he was already with someone else. All that time. While I was growing our child. While I was feeling vulnerable and trusting. He was out there. It wasn't just a violation of our marriage. It was a violation of the sanctity of my pregnancy. The next few days were a blur of appointments. Getting tested for STDs isn't like getting your blood pressure checked. There's the waiting. The anxiety. The sheer humiliation of having to explain to a doctor why you're suddenly here for a herpes test when you've been with the same person for 16 years. All of this, while I was still healing postpartum. Still navigating the absolute chaos of a newborn. Every doctor's visit. Every conversation with a nurse. Felt like another public announcement of my husband's betrayal. And through it all, there was the baby. My beautiful, innocent baby. I had to pump milk. Manage feeding schedules. Make sure she was cared for. All while my entire world was falling apart. My husband acted, I don't know. Contrite, distant. He seemed to want to fix things. But it felt like he was fixing a broken vase with duct tape after dropping it off a skyscraper. I looked at him across the kitchen table. This man I'd spent almost 2 decades with, the father of my child, and felt absolutely nothing but a cold dread. I wanted to scream. To pack a bag and walk out the door. The desire to leave him, to erase him from my life, was overwhelming. It was a 100% certainty in my gut. But then my eyes would fall on the baby monitor. Or I'd think about our shared finances. Our joint name on the mortgage. And the practicalities just swamped me. This isn't like breaking up with a boyfriend before moving in. Or divorcing before kids. I am tied to him. Legally. Financially. And most profoundly. Maternally. I specifically stayed with him for 14 years. Then married him. Then had a child with him. Because I knew he was faithful. Because I knew I didn't want to be a single parent. And now, here I am. Trapped. The very thing I spent almost 2 decades building my life around. Avoiding at all costs. Is staring me in the face. It feels like a cruel joke. How do you even begin to untangle yourself, when every single thread of your life is interwoven with the person who just destroyed it? How do you even start to separate when the logistical nightmare of leaving feels bigger than the pain of staying? I feel utterly, completely stuck. Any advice on navigating this logistical hell while trying to keep my sanity? The wait for the STD test results felt like an eternity. Every phone call, every email notification, made my heart jump into my throat. Even though deep down I knew the chances of me having herpes were slim. We hadn't been intimate in months. And he claims he only cheated twice. The possibility was a dark cloud hanging over me. It was a tangible, physical manifestation of his betrayal. The indignity of sitting in that clinic, explaining my situation. The cold, sterile feeling of it all, it solidified in my mind that this wasn't just a mistake. This was a profound and dangerous breach of trust. When the doctor finally called, her voice calm and professional, to tell me my tests were negative, I felt a release of breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But that relief was quickly swallowed by a bitter realization. He put me through this. He exposed me to this risk. All for only 2 times encounters. Later that week, when the baby was finally asleep and the house was quiet, I knew I had to talk to him again. I sat across from him. The same spot where Head dropped his birthday bomb. And just stared at him. He fidgeted. Avoided my gaze. Remember I started, my voice flat, at the very beginning of our relationship? 16 years ago you told me if I ever wanted to be with someone else, just break up with you first. He flinched. Almost imperceptibly. He probably thought I'd forgotten that conversation. buried under years of shared memories. But I hadn't. It was a cornerstone of our relationship. A promise that had resonated deeply with me after his own experience with being cheated on. He looked up then. His eyes a mix of shame and something else I couldn't quite place. He just mumbled something about how things got out of hand. Things got out of hand, my mind screamed. No. You got out of hand. You chose to violate that sacred trust. You made the conscious decision to lie. To risk my health. To destroy our marriage while I was carrying our child. That moment. Seeing him sit there. Offering weak excuses. The careful facade had maintained for 16 years just crumbled. I saw him for who he really was. Not the man I thought I married. But a stranger. The faithful, loving man I specifically chose to build a life with. To have a family with. Simply did not exist. He was a carefully constructed illusion. All those years. All those reasons I stayed. All the confidence I had in him. It was all based on a lie. The pain of that realization was deeper than the initial shock of the cheating. It was the absolute, crushing certainty that the foundation of my entire adult life, the bedrock of my safety and trust, had been built on quicksand. And now, I'm left with the wreckage. The thing I feared most, becoming a single parent, is no longer a hypothetical. It's the terrifyingly real consequence of staying with a man who has shown me he is not who I thought he was. I spent 16 years avoiding this exact scenario, only to be forced into it by the very person I trusted most. The desire to leave is still there, stronger than ever. But the practicalities, the baby, the finances, the shared life, it's a Gordian knot. I know I can't stay with him. Not really. Not the real him. I feel like I've already emotionally and mentally divorced him. The man I loved is gone, replaced by this person who betrayed everything. But how do you start the physical process when you're still healing from childbirth? Still dealing with a newborn? And every fiber of your life is tied to the man who blew it all up. How do you disentangle from someone when your entire future, including your child's, feels irrevocably linked? I feel so lost. Reddit. Any advice on how to even begin picking up these pieces?